truly loved people. And you know, when people got stuck at the airport in Houston, once my sister did in constituents, I would call Sheila. She'd have me up all night long talking to people on the phone until the problem was resolved. She was dogged about constituent services. She loved people. She was a caregiver also for her mother. Many don't remember this if you weren't here. Her mother lived in New York, and her mother was very ill, and it was during the time that my mother was very ill. Sheila stayed on that phone talking to caregivers. I was on the phone talking to my mother's caregiver. We were comparing notes. We were comparing medicines. We were doing this, that. She'd get on the plane, fly up there, come back here. She was a daughter who truly loved her mother and took care of her mother until the very end. And I learned a lot from Sheila going through what I went through with my mother as she was making her transition. Bye. Also, Sheila was a global citizen. For those of you who've traveled with her, you know she was a queen. Sheila went to school in Nigeria. Now, I've been in refugee camps with Sheila. I've been on many CODELs with Sheila, some of which I led. And Sheila would call me way past the deadline. You all know what I'm talking about, like 24 hours before the CODEL departed, I'm going. I said, but Sheila, the deadline was 3 weeks ago. I'm going. Yes, ma'am. She went. But she provided so much insight and input and brilliance on all of these CODELs until members came back more informed and with more clarity about what the issues were we were dealing with. The last CODEL that I led to Africa, it was, I believe, in 2022 when, during that period, the devastating flood in Pakistan occurred. You know, Sheila was chair of the Pakistan Caucus. She had me on the phone as an appropriator from Ghana, calling back here, making sure that we were ready to respond to the devastation in Pakistan. Sheila said, you've got to go with me to Pakistan. I said, Sheila, we're in Africa, and we got to get back to America first, and I've got to clear my schedule. She said, no, you've got to go with me to Pakistan. Sheila, I can't go, but I'm going to do everything I can do to help. Well, I could not go, but Sheila, we landed here in Andrews. Sheila flew to Houston. The next morning, she left for Pakistan, and she spent, I guess, 5 days there helping people through that dire, terrible flood that was taking place. And she would call me every other hour. Where are we? Did you call USAID? Yes, ma'am. You know, that's how Sheila was. She was a person who was obsessed with taking care of people and changing the world and making life better for everyone. Our personal friendship was deep and broad. You remember she received the John Lewis Award recently for the most amount of 1 minute. And she called me that morning. She says, Barbara, I can't be there, but I want you to accept this award for me. I said, Sheila, they're not going to let me accept an award for you. She said, just do like I would do and tell them you're going to accept it anyway. But that was Sheila. She would not take no for an answer. Also, finally, let me just say, I was her personal photographer. Many of you may have been also. Sheila wanted to make sure she was in every single picture, and if a real photographer wasn't around, she pulled me. And I was looking at my pictures. I have more pictures of Sheila than myself because she made sure she got those pictures taken. But they weren't necessarily for her. They were for her constituents, for her family, for her grandchildren, for her husband. She wanted people to know and to be informed about her work as their public servant. Sheila deserves to rest now. She was a force of nature. Her spirit will live forever. She was fearless, she was loving, she was powerful. And I'm reminded of one scripture, 2 Timothy, and this reminds me of Sheila. For God did not give us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. May Sheila's soul rest in peace, may she rest in power, and may she rest. God bless you.
Representative Lee, it is now my privilege to yield to Representative Yvette Clarke.
Let me thank my colleagues, Congresswoman Sheila McCormick and Congressman Jonathan Jackson. Let me thank our chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Stephen Horsford, and my colleagues of the Congressional Black Caucus for this opportunity to share some thoughts about our dearly beloved colleague, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. To Elwyn Lee, Erica and Jason, other members of the Lee family and staff, loved ones, friends, and constituents, on behalf of myself, the Clark family, the people of the 9th District of New York, I extend my deepest sympathies and heartfelt condolences. Madam Speaker, I rise on this day to remember the gentle lady from Texas, my friend, my mentor, my dear colleague, the Honorable and incomparable Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Sheila was the granddaughter of Jamaican immigrants and a daughter of New York. I was blessed to know her for many years. I've served with her for just short of 18 years. We both served on the Homeland Security Committee, and we bonded over many of our deep connections. You see, my parents are Jamaican immigrants, and as it turned out, Sheila Jackson Lee's uncle was one of my mother's biggest donors when she was a member of the New York City Council. I had an opportunity as a council member to meet the incomparable Sheila Jackson Lee on many events and activities and occasions where we gathered. And so to come to Congress as the only Black woman elected to Congress in the year 2007, I ran into someone who I'd already become acquainted with and who put me under her wings. As the author of the Violence Against Women Act, the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act, the woman who reintroduced the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, H.R. 40, and the bill to provide a study on reparations, our nation will long remember the scale and scope of her legislative acumen and successes. We were blessed because she was a justice seeker, and relentlessly so. There was not a piece of legislation, as one of my colleagues, I think it was Barbara, stated, where she did not come in with an amendment if she found any inequities within that legislation. And she was able to convince members on both sides of the aisle of the need to include an amendment that would provide that breathing room for the oppressed in our communities. And so we are grateful for not only her leadership of the people of Houston, Texas, but by extension, the people across this nation who have benefited from her work. And we in the Congressional Black Caucus and countless others across the nation will long feel the gravity of her absence. One of the projects that we worked on together is now resident at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, and that is the Sojourner Truth Legacy Project. Prior to me arriving here in the House of Representatives, Congresswoman Lee led a group of women to make sure that a bust of Sojourner Truth would be placed in the United States Capitol. And she worked and she worked and she worked. And the year that I was elected, as it turns out, not only was the legislation passed to have that bust created, but it was actually placed in the new Capitol Visitors Center in 2007. She was an integral part of establishing the Sojourner Truth Legacy Project at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, where we look at the work of Black women across this nation, those who are overlooked, who are marginalized, and lift them up for the great works that they do in our communities and across the nation in every community. And so we will miss her counsel. She often spoke about the struggle to establish that bust, which was the presence and the essence of Black women's power in this Capitol. And we're forever grateful to Sheila for her tenacity and her audacity, that she was a warrior. She was a true representative and an advocate of and for the people, who devoted all of her talent, intellect, expertise, and energy to the people. And whatever moments of hardship and uncertainty lie ahead, may we all draw strength from her memory and her legacy. I pray that my sister, the Honorable Sheila Jackson Lee, rests in peace, and that she rests in power. And to, again, her staff members who have been loyal to her, who have worked hard because she worked harder to make a difference in this body, I extend to you, on behalf of the people of the 9th District of New York, the Clark family, and of course, myself, my deepest sympathies and heartfelt condolences. With that, I yield back.
Thank you. It's my privilege to yield to the Honorable Representative Hank Johnson from Georgia's 4th District.
I want to thank Congresswoman Sheila Sherfilis McCormick, as well as Congressman Jonathan Jackson, for convening us together tonight to host this special tribute to our dearly beloved and dearly departed colleague, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Today, I rise with a heavy heart to honor and remember my colleague, but more importantly, my friend, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. The Congresswoman led an extraordinary life, and she leaves an extraordinary legacy of legislative and humanitarian service to mankind. Though short in stature, Sheila Jackson Lee stood tall, and she spoke with command and authority. Never scared, Sheila was bold and imposing. She never played herself cheap, and she certainly wasn't going to let anybody else do so. She was a taskmaster to all who worked for her, and that included whether or not you were paid or just volunteering. And the good thing about it is that when you left her office to go work for someone else, they knew, and it was easy for you to get a job because they knew that you had been trained by fire, you had been forged by fire and trained by the best. And so you did not have a problem with getting a job, and you did a good job because you had been trained. Like her constituents, I often found myself calling her Congresswoman. I had great respect for her, and she was a dear friend who inspired me and countless others with her unwavering dedication, spirit, and strong work ethic. I find solace in the knowledge that her spirit will live on through the lives she has touched and changed, and the causes that she has championed. Her legacy will continue to guide us as we strive to build a more just and equitable society. I extend my deepest condolences to her family, friends, and constituents. Let us honor her memory by continuing her work, lifting our voices to pursue justice, and most importantly, embodying the values she holds so dear. This is how we can honor her legacy. Thank you for your service, and with that, I yield back.
Thank you. It is now my privilege to yield to Honorable Kwesi Mfume from Maryland's 7th District.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the distinguished gentlewoman from Florida for yielding some time. I know there are a lot of people who have a lot to say about someone who we cared about and loved, and so I do appreciate this time. I want to thank her and the honorable gentleman from the state of Nevada, Mr. Horsford, the chair of the caucus, for convening this special order tonight. And it is a special order for a lawyer, a legislator, a woman who saw things that were not and found it in her heart to find a way to make those things come into existence. So I extend my condolences to her husband, Elwin, to her 2 adult children, to other members of the Jackson Lee family, and to the people of Houston who knew her, embraced her, loved her, and kept her. I first heard of Sheila Jackson Lee before she ever got here. In fact, I was a member of the House then, and she came in with a big class. I think she got here in 95, and she won the election in 94. I think Jim Clyburn was a part of that class, Bobby Scott, Maxine Waters, a number of people who came in the door bigger than life. And there was Sheila, who was also bigger than life, and who taught us along the way things that were sometimes not so obvious about fighting for what you believed in. She was a member of the Houston City Council before she got here, and they didn't know what to do with her because she would not stop fighting for the things that she believed in, one of which was gun control and gun safety, long before it became something popular for people to talk about and to advocate. And it was in that Houston City Council that Sheila passed their first ever gun safety ordinance, putting the onus on parents to keep guns away from children in the house, to keep them locked, or to not have them there altogether. And some people thought it was an overreach. But nobody knows to this day how many lives may have been saved, how many children could have been injured that were not. And then it was many years later that that same council and many of the people of Houston thanked her for what she had done. Now, before Sheila got here, Craig Washington was the elected member of that district. And in his first term, Sheila challenged him for the congressional seat. She said, "I need your support." I said, "Well, Sheila, Craig just supported me to be chair of the Black Caucus 2 years ago. I can't turn my back on him." She said, "Well, don't turn your back, turn your front. Just stay out of it." I said, "Okay, I'm going to stay out of it." And everybody said she couldn't do it. You can't beat Craig Washington. And we all know how that story concluded. So when she came here and took the oath of office, I, like so many others, gave her a great big hug, because I knew that not just the Congressional Black Caucus, but the Congress in general was going to be made better because of her indefatigable spirit. Sheila was a woman that never rested. I mean, you could walk the halls here at midnight and see her hanging out at a Rules Committee meeting, trying to make sure she could get an amendment in and trying to make sure she could find a way to make a difference. Now, I remember that first year of 95 when she got here, she went up to Charlie Rangel and said, "I want to know everything you knew about Barbara Jordan." And Charlie said, "Well, you did know Barbara, right?" She said, "Yes, I loved her and admired her. But you know what I don't know because you served with her. So tell me all about the way she was here and how she made a real difference." And then she came over to me afterwards and said, and I want you to stay here because I want you to tell me all about Mickey Leland. She said, you served with him, you and Mickey were buddies, and you sat with him the night before he left to take that flight that he never came back on. I want to know what you talked about and what's going to happen now that he's gone and I'm here, and how do I find a way, like with Barbara Jordan, to make a real difference in this house. Her spirit was irrepressible. She had a personality that was all her own. The word was that witnesses coming before the Judiciary Committee didn't want to come before the Judiciary Committee if they were wrong, because they knew as a trained lawyer, she would find a way to pick them apart. And she did over and over again. And she did it not for herself, but to have the truth come out and to make sure that the testimony was something that people could build on and learn from. She worked so hard. I'm looking at this white bouquet of flowers, and I almost picked it up and walked it over to that aisle on the edge where every year, every president that came down that aisle had to shake the hand and say hello to and pay some homage to Sheila Jackson Lee. So we loved her, we still love her, and we will always love her. She was a worker who made all of us around her work harder, and we are all so much better because of the fact that she served here. Now, our dear friend Don Payne Jr. passed away a couple of months ago, and many of us went to Newark for the funeral. It was a tough loss, just like this is. I had served with his dad, and so it was especially tough for me because his dad and I were buddies. But I point now to Congressman Jackson of Illinois, who I said that day, thank you so much for taking care of Sheila. She could barely get up to Newark with us, but she cared so much about paying tribute and honor to someone she worked with and cared about that she found a way, barely walking, to get on that plane, to go to that funeral, and to come back. And I commended Congressman Jackson for taking the time to do all that he could to make her trip better and to keep her safe from all that could have gone on, not so much on the trip, but in terms of her health, because we all knew that she was declining and we didn't know what was going on. So thank you, Jonathan, for that. My thanks to all the members of the caucus who are here, all of which have stories about Sheila and our love for her. And I can tell you, because I feel it, her spirit will remain in this place for a long, long time to come. Every time somebody says Juneteenth, they're going to say Sheila Jackson Lee, or reparations Sheila Jackson Lee, because she would run behind us, have you signed on to HR 40 yet? And we'd say yes, and she'd say, go get me 2 others. So again, thank you so much for yielding. My thanks to all of you from the caucus who are here. Congresswoman Lee, thank you for reminding us of some stories that we had long since forgotten, and I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my privilege to yield to the Honorable Assistant Leader, Joe Neguse.
First, let me say thank you to the distinguished gentlewoman from Florida and the gentleman from Illinois for hosting this important special order hour to honor our friend, our beloved colleague, Judge Jackson Lee. It's a blessing to be able to serve in the People's House with giants. And Madam Speaker, you've had the opportunity tonight to hear from several, to be able to serve with Congresswoman Lee and to serve with Congressman Mfume, among many others, and to hear their perspectives on their time serving with Judge Jackson Lee. Mark Twain once said that history doesn't often repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And as Mr. Mfume was describing the late Judge Jackson Lee and her adulation and respect and admiration for Barbara Jordan, the first black woman to ever be elected to the United States Congress from the state of Texas, I was reminded of a story, which is that at the end of her life, Congresswoman Jordan, she had a bone-deep devotion to the Constitution, bone-deep devotion and faith in the Constitution, which was shown on full display during her service in the Congress, in particular during the Watergate proceedings. In 1996, when Barbara Jordan passed away and they were searching through her belongings, they found in her purse a copy of the U.S. Constitution. And I can see as clear as day right now our friend, Judge Jackson Lee, on the Judiciary Committee, where myself and Representative Johnson and others had the privilege to serve with her. I can see her holding the Constitution out as she's questioning a variety of different witnesses that have come through that committee. Judge Lee's faith and devotion and commitment to the Constitution was bone deep. And to hear Representative Mfume describe his conversations with her as she asked him about the great Barbara Jordan, it's beyond moving. As I try to come up with the right word to describe Judge Lee, and I call her Judge Lee because I would always call her Judge Lee. She would call me Attorney General, although I've never been an Attorney General, but she had decided that that would be my moniker. As I try to develop and think and have spent time over the past several days to describe the word, or rather conjure up the word that I would use to describe her, the best word that I've been able to come up with is prolific. She was a prolific orator. One need only look at the C-SPAN records to see that she spent more time on the House floor in this chamber speaking directly to the American public than any member of the U.S. House of Representatives. Think about that legacy. She was a prolific legislator. We've heard from many of my colleagues about the many bills that she was able to get across the finish line, signed into law by multiple presidents. For me, the work that I remember most vividly is her work to combat gun violence, which was a lifelong passion of hers that she pushed for on the Judiciary Committee. She was a prolific colleague. I, too, joined my colleagues at the funeral for Don Payne Jr., and I remember well seeing Judge Lee at that service and being so moved that someone fighting such a terrible disease would somehow muster the physical stamina and courage and strength to venture to New Jersey to say goodbye to her friend. About a month ago, 6 weeks ago, I got a call. I was here in Washington at 10:50 p.m. on a Wednesday night from Representative Jackson Lee. She was in Houston. I thought that she was calling to check in, perhaps. I was eager to talk to her about her fight against cancer. She had fought so valiantly, as Representative Barbara Lee articulated earlier, in her first bout with breast cancer over a decade before. I had shared with her that my wife had been battling breast cancer for the last year, and that we were drawing strength, knowing that she was steadying herself for this next battle. But she didn't call me to talk about the disease. She called to harangue me about a press conference that was scheduled for the next day, that she was eager to solicit my help in securing speakers for, an important bill that she intended to roll out, notwithstanding whatever physical ailments she might have been fighting at the moment. Working until the end. And I know I'm not the only one who was a recipient or a beneficiary of her calls. Prolific. I'll close with my final observation. I remember coming into the Congress, and of course Representative Mufume mentioned this, I suspect others have as well. One of my first images of Judge Jackson Lee was her sitting here, right next to the main entryway to this august chamber during the State of the Union address. Without fail, every year, she would be seated right here. A few days ago, I came across a commendation, a recounting of Judge Jackson Lee's life and this particular author's view of why Judge Jackson Lee always found herself right here. Their view, their belief, their theory was that for a black woman representing tens of millions of people from the state of Texas, a woman who was in one of the first co-ed classes at Yale, one of the first black women to matriculate from that institution, it was important to her that others see her, that young black women, like my 6-year-old daughter, could see her, could be inspired by her, could know that if they worked hard enough, they too could find themselves shaking the hand of every president for the better part of the last quarter century. And reading that, it all made sense. Godspeed, Judge Lee. Thank you for your service to our country. Your family is in our prayers. I yield back.
Thank you. It's now my privilege to yield to Representative Ayanna Pressley from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Congresswoman Sheila Sherfless-McCormick, Congressman Jackson, for convening this special order hour for indeed a special woman. I rise to celebrate the life and legacy of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas' 18th District, legislator, scholar, orator, truth teller, and justice seeker. From Houston to Boston, from the nation's capital to throughout the African diaspora, Sheila Jackson Lee is a name you should know. But if you don't, trust me, you have benefited from her work. Recognizing Juneteenth as a national holiday, reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act, advocating for police accountability, reparations, and so much more. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee will always be remembered as a force to be reckoned with, who loved her constituents dearly and represented them with sincerity. I can see her now in my mind's eye, folders full of notes spilling over, research, question lines, floor statements, multiple bags, and layered clothing. A colorful scarf to beat the chill and show her own unique style, and always her hair in a regally braided crown. With nearly 30 years of service in Congress, she spent every moment working towards progress. In our final text exchange before her transition to ancestors, she said to me, "Keep working on our priorities. We cannot give up." So in her memory, alongside my colleagues in the Congressional Black Caucus, her staff, current and former, her constituents, and her family, we will continue the fight for justice. SJL, I already miss your rich and powerful voice, but most of all, I'll miss how you used it for the people. Rest in peace and power.
It is now my privilege to yield to the Honorable Troy Carter from Louisiana.
Thank you very much, my esteemed colleagues, for the opportunity to be here. We're here to honor the memory of a dear friend and colleague, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, a true statesman and a fierce defender of justice, fairness, and our great democracy. A dedicated member of the Congressional Black Caucus, her contributions have been nothing short of transformative and incredible. I was blessed to visit her numerous times in Houston, Texas, and travel with her around the world. She was also instrumental in helping so many Louisiana natives during Hurricane Katrina, providing exceptional casework and services in Houston. After Katrina, so many of our people were homeless, lost, in need of love and care. Sheila Jackson Lee was there. She called us regularly to give us reports. Whenever there was an issue in Houston and it was someone from Louisiana, she was Johnny on the spot. Wasn't her district, wasn't her people. They couldn't vote for her. It was her true love and passion for people that caused her to step up. She was a giant, although small in stature. Her heart was so big and her brain was even bigger. I've never met anyone as passionate and as smart on every single issue she touched. When she stepped up, she spoke with a degree of power, familiarity, intellect, energy, and grace. They just don't make them like that anymore. You've heard my colleagues say that she would show up everywhere. Once we came back from a codel across the country, and while we were stuck because we had plane trouble, we were stuck waiting for another aircraft, and then there was an issue going on in India. And we were all exhausted trying to make it home. Sheila said, I've got to go there. I've got a lot of natives in my community. And we were all exhausted. And we said, everyone chuckled and said, we're all going home. Next thing I know, I looked at CNN when I got home, and there was Sheila Jackson Lee. She was there in the midst of it all by herself, not a part of a codel, not a part of any other team, not a part of anything other than a person with a big heart that knew that she was needed. She was the first female ranking member of the Judiciary Subcommittee for Crime, Terrorism, and Homeland Security. And as a senior member of the House Committee on Judiciary, Homeland Security, and Budget, she spearheaded critical policies for institutional change. Her reintroduction of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act exemplified her unwavering commitment to uplifting the Black community and improving our nation. Sheila called me, as our assistant leader just mentioned, and she said, I need you to go and run this press conference for me. I can't be there, but I need you to go and run the press conference, and I need you to address the family and let them know how much we love them and how much we care. And I can't be there, but I'll be on the phone. And she was on the phone. We couldn't see her. I suspect she may have been in the hospital. But she spoke with the same degree of love, passion, and strength for the family who had been so wronged. I was honored when she made that call to me personally in May to partner with her on the press conference promoting this critical piece of legislation. It is one of her most recent and fond memories of working closely with her. It was one of the very last official actions of her passion, and there's so many. We will forevermore miss the intellect, the passion, the strength, the courage of Sheila Jackson Lee. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee will be sorely missed by her immediate family, her Congressional Black Caucus family, her Democratic Caucus family, all the citizens of Texas, and countless others she touched around the world. Her unwavering commitment to her principles and her tireless advocacy for the underrepresented, has left an indelible mark on our nation. On a personal note, Sheila was just not a colleague, but also a treasured friend and mentor to me and many others. We devoted a bond of service for mankind. Her wisdom, compassion, and strength has guided us through many challenges. Her legacy will continue to inspire all of us as we strive to be better, do better, and try to continue the incredible work that she's done. Rest in peace, my dear sister. Rest in peace.
Thank you, Representative Carter. Madam Speaker, may I inquire how much time is remaining?
The gentlelady has until 10 p.m., so there's about 9 minutes remaining.
Thank you. I'd like to yield now to my co-anchor, Representative Jonathan Jackson from Illinois.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the Honorable Sheila Sherfliffe McCormick, my co-anchor in this Congressional Black Caucus Special Order Hour. I'd like to be affiliated with all of the comments that my colleagues have shared regarding this remarkable woman, our colleague and dear friend, Sheila Jackson Lee. Madam Speaker, I rise tonight to lend my voice to the chorus of those who have gathered in this chamber to honor and give mournful recompense to the life and legacy of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, a woman of such grave significance who even in repose remains a towering figure among us. Sheila Jackson Lee was no shrinking violet. She was no harbinger of demure expectations, and she did not cower in the face of adversity, nor did she retreat in the midst of a storm. Sheila Jackson Lee did not do as some have already done, namely get elected to political office and forget where they come from. Sheila Jackson Lee carried the people of Houston with her because her dreams were their dreams too. Their adversities were her adversities too. And she wanted for them, she no less, and likewise wanted for herself. Here is a woman who in her lifetime had to deal with policies, who told her she had to sit in the back of a bus. And she went from having people tell her she had to go through the back door to being a member of Congress who passed laws to make America a better place for all people. She lived long enough to see President Barack Obama ascend to the presidency. She lived long enough to see a Supreme Court justice in a Ketanji Brown elevated to the Supreme Court. And she was just a few days away from living to see Vice President Harris selected to be the Democratic nominee for the presidency of the United States. What a life, what a witness, what a legacy. Tonight I say to you, a mighty oak has fallen. I shared so many evenings and days and times with Congresswoman Lee. My heart is filled, and I thank God for having come this way. I felt in many ways, in the words of the book of Animal Farms, all animals are equal and some are more equal. I'd never looked at myself as a peer of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. I was honored to carry her bags. I was honored to walk beside her. I was honored to be in the midst of her company. And I thank God for having put me in a place where I could be from afar and then in my lifetime be able to work up close and hand in hand with her. And there in this place where she will no longer stand lives a hole that will never be filled in this chamber. Because while none of us are indispensable, some of us can never be replaced. That is the legacy of Sheila Jackson Lee. This is the brightness of the one who we remember, who in death has become both the singer and the song. So let the word go forth from this time and place that Sheila Jackson Lee was a steel magnolia, one of the daughters of thunder, a woman of such invention and personal power that you could hear the sound of the oceans gathering in her voice. voice. She was, she is, and she will always be one of the great gifts of the African American community to the future of America. And tonight we remember her. Tonight we sit upon the ground and tell sad stories, and we laugh and joke about the death of a queen here in this chamber. And under the canopy of this temple of democracy, we dare to make letters of her once and glorious life. From serving as the first female ranking member of the Judiciary Subcommittee for Crime, Terrorism, and Homeland Security, Sheila's talents made room for herself. She will be missed, she will be mourned, she will be lamented. But now she belongs to the ages. And like Barbara Jordan, Shirley Chisholm, John Lewis, and Donald Payne, she will be watching over us. Sleep on, my sister. You deserve your race. You have won the race. God will bless you. I yield back my time to the Honorable Sheila Sherfulis McCormick.
Thank you so much. I yield the rest of the time to myself. The nation mourns the loss of a tireless advocate for justice and a beacon of hope for so many. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee was not just a member of Congress, she was a force of nature, a relentless champion for civil rights and a voice for the voiceless. For nearly 3 decades, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee's work in this chamber showcased her unwavering commitment to justice and equality. Her reintroduction of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is just one example of her dedication to fight for equal justice. This bill, which I was so proud to co-sponsor, aimed to hold law enforcement accountable, improving training, and rebuilding the trust of the communities they serve. It is a testament to her vision for a fairer and more just America. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee believed deeply in the power of the federal government to enact meaningful reform. She knew that while no single policy could erase decades of systemic racism, it was imperative to take bold steps towards structural change. Her legacy will be felt in every stride we make towards justice. To me, Sheila Jackson Lee was the originator. We always joked around when she said, she's the first Sheila, I'm the second Sheila. And I always said, Sheila, you're the originator. Every time she saw me, she was like, do you need anything? I remember when I last spoke to her, I said, Sheila, you sound strong today. And she said, Sheila, whatever you need, call me, I'll be there. If you need to know how to do it, I'll show you. She made me a promise. She said, I will always be there. And the day she passed, I said, Sheila, we will remember your legacy. She was at every special order hour.
Amen.
Every single one. And the last one, I looked back and I said, Sheila, you ready? And she said she couldn't do it. And Jonathan held her, and I knew that was the last time. Rest in power, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. I yield back. I move that the House do now adjourn.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. Accordingly, pursuant to House Resolution 1366, the House stands adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow as a further mark of respect to the memory of the late Honorable Sheila Jackson Lee.